One of the key things that I always focus on with business owners and CEOs is what is your position of market dominance? A lot of times I bring that up with especially the smaller companies. They're like, oh, yeah, you got to be a Google or a Amazon to have a position of market dominance. And I tell them, no, that's not true. What it's all about is being the best, known as the best or among the best companies in your market. Whatever that market is where you sell and where you do business, you want to have a very strong position of market dominance. And so that's where I typically start with when I do my coaching is what is your position of market dominance?
Business Money Podcast. Business Money Podcast Fearless. Business Money Podcast Fearless. Business Money Podcast.
Welcome to the Business Money Podcast, where intelligent financing meets strategic thinking. We are very excited to be here with Mike Hopkin, that is going to tell us a little bit about what he's doing for more than 2 decades when in regards to software product leadership development. This is Andres Capital TV. We are in the Business Money Podcast. Mike, how are you today?
I am doing well, Andres. It's great to be with you.
I am very excited. So, Mike, just to basically kind of guide our audience a little bit and kind of give them a little bit of where you've been. So for those that are living under a rock, maybe they don't know what you do. I want to just basically welcome you and kind of tell a little bit about your story, and then you can expand on it. So Mike Hopkins brings more than 2 decades of software product leadership and a discipline forged on a working cattle ranch in northern Utah. Okay, so we need to know about that. I'm very interested to know about that, where he learned that early results come from showing up with accountability and consistency. Mike has built and scaled teams at technology companies, shipping products used by millions of people worldwide, probably that you use every day. And of course, Mike has developed a reputation of translating complex challenges into clear strategies, assembling high-performing teams, and consistently delivering outcomes that matter to users and of course, all of the businesses alike. So there's so much that we're going to learn today in our conversation. Mike, I love that because actually it is something that I see very common in leaders that understand how to solve very complex problems. But tell me a little bit about your upbringing and your story in Utah. I'm very excited to know about your background.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I grew up on a cattle ranch. And it's in a very small town in the very northeastern part of Utah, kind of right up by the Wyoming, Idaho border. But I grew up working. Like my dad had me out moving sprinkler pipes at 6 years old, and I was driving a tractor by the time I was 9. And I even had my own cattle herd by the time I was 15 years old. So he taught me at a young age to work, and he showed me that what I work and what I put my effort and my heart into will bring results. And that has just been a blessing to me throughout my whole career.
Mike, so I mean, and I want to bring us all back because we all been, hopefully we got to this age and we all been kids at some point. So knowing that, very interesting that you grew up and you started looking at everything around you. Kind of like, this is the beauty of like childhood, is the observational
Yeah.
kind of understanding of the world. So that taught you, I think, to be very observant about things and how things work. Tell me a little bit about that and how those values really shape you in making decisions on very complex situations in this business.
Yeah, those values, like you mentioned, the seeing things around you and figuring out how to use them and make them work for you. Just being aware of that kind of thing has been a great help to me. It was in my early 20s when I decided to leave the ranch, and I got into I actually got my degree, my bachelor's degree in accounting, but I started using computers and I fell in love with computers, and I thought I wanted to change my major to computer science. And my wife was like, no, 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 you can't change. You've changed enough. And so, but anyway, I got the master's degree in information systems, and I took some computer science classes on the side. And initially out of college, I wanted to get some really good technical experience under my belt. And so I spent the first 4.5 years doing software programming, writing code in Java and C++. And it was really good experience for me to really understand the technical side of software. And as I was in that part of my career, I started working with product managers, and I I've just one day it just hit me. That's what I want to do. And so got an opportunity and I took it and I moved into product management and software product management specifically. So, yeah.
Okay, got you. So you're interested in technology, and again, your understanding of processes, because I think actually when we're growing up, and you're telling me it's about reviewing processes and accomplishing things. Okay, so if you have cattle, well, okay, if you want to make cheese, okay, where do we start with the supply chain? What
Yeah.
processes need to get done to get
Yeah.
to the cheese, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, everything starts somewhere. All right. So you start looking at processes the same way that you probably did, with all of these clear strategies and assembling high performing teams, understanding basically the pieces of the puzzle. So tell me I have one question for you. Maybe we can guide our audience into that because most of them are, entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, business owners, SMEs, small, medium enterprise. And then, of course, we have our, mid market companies, that really, want to learn, okay, we have a problem. We have a ceiling. We want to break on up of that ceiling. What is the biggest hurdles right now that people have when it comes to assembling teams?
I think, there's I would say there's maybe two hurdles. The first one is one that most people don't really think about, but it's what am I willing to give up and not have to do? Because one book I love to mention when it comes to this is a book called Who Not How. I recommend it to everybody by Dr. Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan. Awesome book. But one of the things that you have to be willing to do is give up things that you had been doing. Now, a lot of times people are like, I'm happy to do that, and it's a good thing. And so but that's something you have to be aware of. And then the other thing is finding the right people who to do the jobs where their passion is whatever that job is. That is the other key to building an organization that's going to grow and thrive and prosper.
I love what you just said. Look, because I think this is actually a something that happens in most of the, I mean, I even call it families, organizations. Because really, like when you think about, okay, what makes a good, team, for an organization, especially, that you're in charge of millions or billions of dollars, of, production assets, you name it, impact, to the world in the community, is that you need to understand that not everybody is the same. Now you can create a baseline of values of, hey, look, if you are an artist, you uphold yourself to the highest standard.
Yeah.
If you are an operator, you uphold yourself to the higher standard. If you are in the visionary piece or in the sales piece or whatever it is your function, if you are cleaning the floors of the organization, you uphold yourself to the highest standard. And that's fine. We all have our strengths and weaknesses and we put them together. You build, I call it assembling our Avengers. Actually, this is
Yeah.
actually a terminology that I use a lot. Where's Steve Rogers? Where's, like, all right, what do we have here? So that's perfectly. But it starts with you then having the capacity to assess the person, right? I mean, I don't know if I'm wrong about this, Mike. Tell me a little bit about.
Yeah, you have to be able to assess them. And the best way that I have found to assess people is ask them questions and let them talk. Just find out what gets them excited, what really moves them. And if it's what you need and if it's what you're interviewing them for, then it's often a very much a win-win. And you're like, let's get started, let's go. I mean, obviously it takes a little more than just a few words like that, but you have to dig in and ask a lot of questions. But my approach is to ask questions, just ask questions and let them talk and hear what they have to say, see what moves them, see what drives them. Because when it comes to hiring someone in your business to do some work or some job, something that needs to get done, you want them to love what they're doing. You want them to want to do it because that will get them up in the morning. That will get them there. That will they'll make sure they get the work done and they do it well. And that is the key to having a successful organization is having people, in the old Jim Collins book, he talked about the bus and having the right people on the right seats of the bus. And that's a good metaphor how you want to build out your business.
I love that analogy, actually. Yeah, because actually that's the way I think about life. I mean, and this is me personally, Mike. I want to get a little bit more into your, basically methodology to work with a lot of successful CEOs and business owners and helping leaders, cut through complexity, right? Which you speak about and define executable strategies. Because I mean, to be honest, like we can get excited about certain ideas, but when it comes to implementation, and especially in our, let's say, businesses or companies, we may find hurdles. It's different to let's say implement an executable strategy in a construction company compared to, let's say, a SaaS company, right? So we have different, again, we're dealing with different kind of, I guess, industries and mentalities, and also, acumen of, let's say, people in different areas. They can be experts in one thing, but not experts in another. So, Mike, when you are looking at us, and I want to, and to give a little bit of context, I want to take people into, like, what are the stages of a business? Usually, there's 5 stages. Most business owners that start, of course, that's number one. Let's say the startup stage, then the early stage, then you get to the mid stage. That's number three. Then maturity. That's where you're like really dealing with the CEOs and big organizations, C-level executives, and all of that. That's where the juice is at. Like really, we get excited about that. And then there's the X. I believe that even if you're starting your business right now in phase one, you got to plan like if you're gonna get to five.
Mhm.
If you do that, at least you give it a little bit of organization into, hey, let's accomplish this. Let's get timelines. Let's get things done. How do you walk through dealing with a CEO right now, or talking to a CEO that is listening to us right now? How can you help him make that assessment of the people and what drives you? And then how do you put the people in place?
Well, I think making the assessment of the people is, again, just getting to know them, what drives them, what do they love to do, and getting them doing the right things. And then just give them freedom to do their work. Don't watch over, don't lord over them. Don't micromanage them. That's the word you hear more often these days. Let them do their work and, obviously be there, support them, let them know that, you care, there's a lot of things you have to do to be an effective CEO, but one of the best things you can do is just give your team the ability to do their jobs the way they want to do it, and they will do the best work. They will do better work than you could if you were doing it. That's the kind of people you want to hire. Again, they love what they do. Let them do it. They'll do a great job. Your business will be successful. That's the approach that I have taken. And I realize just sitting here saying these things, it sounds easy, when you just talk in these kind of words. There's a lot of work that goes into this. It's not an easy job. You got to really focus. You got to pay attention, be present with them, and be available for questions, for running things by, that kind of stuff. That's really important. That's how I like to build up teams.
Do you start with the calendar? Do you start with the, let's say, the divisions of the company? Where do you start? Tell us a little bit about, when you're having this conversation.
Well, it depends on the company, and kind of where the CEO is and what the other thing that I haven't mentioned and that's really important is you want to make sure that the business owner and or the CEO, the person who is at the top running the company, is doing what they love to do and what they're really good at. And if they're focused on what they really do and what they're really good at, getting the team and all that kind of stuff just kind of falls, and it doesn't fall into place, but it's easy to get it going and get it into place. And so as far as, getting it started, I'm not sure I have single specific way I do it. It's just where are they at? What are their needs? And how do we fulfill those needs with the right people? And then just get that going and build on that. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, Mike. No, and look, there's no wrong answer in this. I just want to understand, because let's say we discuss with this with clients and with companies. We get to the expansion stage, so we want to help expand companies. Start, from startup all the way to business expansion. Get to level 4, where you're mature, you're selling, or number 5, where you're selling. You got acquire either horizontally or vertically through, basically integration for a bigger company, you name it, right? You have a product, you're basically bringing in, you build this company to suffice another bigger company that is going to absorb you, you get an exit. Now, two ways that you can expand, three ways that you can expand. Of course, we can, you use capital, but what do you use the capital for? Right? This is one of the biggest pain points I see in a lot of companies. Most companies, if you ask 185% of the companies that we ask, they want more capital. All right. None of them tell me, oh, we don't want money, Andres. No, we have too much money. No, they want,
Yeah,
I mean, trust me, that's not the response I get. All right.
right.
Now, the other part is when you ask them, what are you going to use the money for?
That's the key. Right.
Very interesting. That's the key.
Yeah.
And you got to ask yourself those questions and you got to work with people like Mike, because guess what? When you are considering basically, you might be laser focused on one thing, and that's fine. Like again, like I believe it's like me, I'm serving my mission, my purpose, through that I lead and everything. But I have to also be aware of, hey, I need people, let's say AI. This is a very good example. There's people that hone in 180% of their effort into, and I know I got my numbers skewed there, but they're focused on AI.
Yeah.
I'm not as focused on AI because I'm maybe, I'm generationally, maybe my skills, like not. So we bring
Yeah.
in experts that can give us that.
Yeah.
Are those, is that a common conversation right now that you're having, Mike, with companies and CEOs?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you bring up AI, because AI is everywhere now, and pretty much every company is using it in some way. What I'm finding among a lot of companies is that they just aren't quite sure how to use it, or how to use it effectively in a way that's going to really change their company. But back to what you were saying about, getting the money and putting that money to work. That is one of the things that I've helped a lot of. I didn't mention this, but the last 2.5 years I've been doing business coaching. And what I've helped a lot of the business owners and the CEOs that I've coached is, what is the most effective use of that capital? What are the things that you need to do to make it work the best for your company? And so that's, it's so important, because, I've seen too many companies over the years that they get a lot of money and they kind of squander it. They don't know how to use it effectively, and they end up spending it and not getting the value back.
Very, very good point, Mike. Because one of the things that we see, and again, let's say on level one, you're in a startup. By the way, if you're listening to us and you're looking at us right now and you want to learn more about Mike, we are going to put his links and his contact information so you can have a coaching session with him. He can tell you basically how to go through this process and help you expand your business. But one thing, number one, when you're in an early stage and or a startup, you are getting that capital, but it's through seed capital, friends and family. Maybe you're selling
Bootstrapping. Yeah.
your classic car. You're selling. All right, well, I'm selling this property, whatever. Hey, look, I've been there, done that. Got the
Uh-huh.
T-shirt and the coffee mug. All right, but that's
Uh,
one point. Okay, but then let's say you get to early stage and you start raising capital through Series A, Series B. You have your annual goals that you need to achieve, and guess what? You're gonna have to now bring in, a lot more capital, which is part of the
Yeah.
basically the growth the growth strategy, because you're gonna have bring in people, and I mean again, the machinery is gonna need people, processes, SOPs, you name it, to be able to scale. It's not gonna be you doing everything, right? So you're gonna get those C-level executives that are going to drive production, operation, CFOs, let's say, because a good CFO helps you raise capital. That's basically part. I mean, I've been asked, to join organizations to bring in as a CFO, to bring in capital. Now you get to, let's say, you get to your mid stage, you're going to need capital as well. To me, that's why the analysis of capital tells us what have been the pain points and the mistakes maybe in the capital deployment, because a lot of times we see losses. We look at revenue recovery. I'm like, what happened here? What's going on with this? This was a loss, and why do you report losses on this? Oh, we had a contract that this and that. So there's weaknesses in the actual contract. That is part of a value of a company.
yeah.
I always say, when a paper can make or break your company, because one word can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
We've seen it in contracts.
Yeah.
It's not speaking of contractors and things like that. Just one word. So one of the things that we do is we do speak to legal teams, with attorneys, we talk, to a lot of business attorneys and different stages that can help, kind of tighten that as well. Mike, so tell me a little bit about when you do that and you see that what is your recommendation right now when you're looking at a company? Where do you see the value of a company really be when it comes to growing and expanding, especially in this new age, like because a lot of people are asking themselves this.
Depends on that's a great question. And in my experience, I've coached a lot of business owners and CEOs from different industries. And yet most of my work, my experience for my career has been in the technology industry, specifically in software tech. So my high level answer to your question is it depends. It really depends, but where, for like a technology company, a lot of times where they need to put their money is for engineering or it's for marketing or it depends what it seems the way it seems to work in my experience is depending on the background of the CEO or the owner who started the founder of the company, whatever their background was in is where they're going to have the strong points in their company as they build it out. If they were a marketer in their previous part of their career, they're going to have a really strong marketing organization. But if they're building software, they may have a weak engineering organization. And if their background is in technology and they've had a technical background, they might have a great engineering organization and not really have a good sales team or a good marketing. So it really depends on what they're at. And that's part of why you have to dig down. And another thing that I'll just mention this real quick. And if you want to go into it a little more, we can. But one of the key things that I always focus on with business owners and CEOs is what is your position of market dominance? And a lot of times I bring that up with especially the smaller companies. They're like, "Oh yeah, you got to be a Google or a Amazon to have a position of market dominance." And I tell them, "No, that's not true. What it's all about is being the best, known as the best or among the best companies in your market. Whatever that market is where you sell and where you do business, you want to have a very strong position of market dominance." And so that's where I typically start with when I do my coaching is, with what is your position of market dominance? How do we make it strong? If it's a software company, we got to make sure that the products you're building are very much in line with that. And depending on what your company is, everything you do, your messaging, your sales, your engineering, all of the things that you have to do to build out a successful company must be aligned with that position of market dominance. And the entire team that you've hired must understand that and do a good job of that. That was a little maybe off topic. I apologize.
No, that's good. Mike, I love your explanation on this because yes, most of the time people don't understand where they're at actually in the market. They don't really think about that. I mean, they think, okay, well, I mean, look, this is an example that comes up a lot because honestly, it's a failure, but it's something that I keep thinking about. And I'm going to tell you the phrase that I use. I never want to be a Motorola or a BlackBerry or, I mean, it's like, it was the number one. You had no way to lose your clients because you dominated all the business market
Yeah.
for communication or handheld communication, basically at that time. I still miss my BlackBerry. I mean, I guess it's the nostalgia about that or whatever,
Yeah.
but now what happened to them? They did not pivot. They did not understand the changes. I mean, and this is
Yeah.
something very interesting.
That's the key.
Well, how do we not become, a BlackBerry?
I mean, obviously, BlackBerry and Motorola, the two examples you bring up, are very complicated, and there's a whole bunch to those companies that I have no insight into or no idea about. But to answer your question, how do we not become that? Is to just to be aware of where is the market going? How are things going? I'll share with you one of my favorite quotes of all time, and I first heard this from one of my professors years ago in college, and it's by Eric Hoffer, and it goes like this: learners inherit the future, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to work in a world that no longer exists. And what that tells me is you have got to be a learner. You've just got to be hungry to keep learning, keep growing, keep progressing. And if you do that, you'll be the apple. You won't be the BlackBerry. Or I can't remember what their company was called anymore, but their product was BlackBerry.
Texas Instrument, but no, I'm just kidding. Just, no,
That's another example.
that is a good example too. It's like,
Yeah.
look, I mean, my college education, like even in school and in high school, I mean, I had a Texas Instrument calculator. What
I did
happened to
too.
that?
And
I
I had a
used to,
BlackBerry phone early in my career. So yeah.
and I had a Kodak camera.
Yeah. You
Mike,
just got to keep learning. You got to keep growing. I mean, that's the key. So yeah, great questions.
no, I love it, Mike. I remember when I used to put in my resume that I knew how to use Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Okay. So this is what I tell all my nephews, and actually the young people that we coach, through our chambers and the Latino Franchise Council and everything is like, look, this is what you got to understand. The new Word, Excel, PowerPoint and everything is, you know, ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok,
Well, yeah,
Perplexity. You gotta use them all, and you gotta
yeah,
use them all, and you gotta get acquainted with them. And again, this week Gemini wins. Next week is Grok because they're in a battle, right? We see all this capital deployment right now is going through this. We saw the IPO just basically launch with Elon Musk. Like
SpaceX.
money, capital is flowing to technology. And
Yeah,
to technology, not just because it's a rocket, but it's because of everything else that is integrated into those companies that Elon Musk has. But that is one example that we can understand about where the money and where the world is going. So if you have young kids, if you are thinking, okay, I want my kid to become an entrepreneur, or he has interesting things, I believe in this, Mike, and this ties into the assessment of the person. I always do what is called a SWOT analysis on a person. I mean, I see it with my board, with the board of that we have in the chambers and in our companies and everything. It's like, okay, what do we have? What is the people? Assessing the people through a SWOT analysis? Then what are the weaknesses? And that's okay. We all have them. I mean, I'm not, again, I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. But how can we make things better? Or what can we, let's say, support ourselves with other people that have the strengths that we don't have and build our Avengers through that? And I believe this is basically a call to action right now. If you're looking at us to talk to Mike, why? Because this is things that we don't really think of if we stay in our silo alone and we are not really around people that solve very complex problems right now. Just basically in that sense is something I love about entrepreneurs, business owners, eh, coaches, in this case, like you, Mike. So, Mike, just to wrap it up and kind of like, descend this airplane, where we're flying through so many different things. Where can people find you? How can people really you contact you? Can you give us a little bit about that?
yeah. I would love to be in contact with anyone who hears this. Feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. I go by Mike Hopkin. You can find me. You can search Hopkin Profit Creation. That's my business, and it'll pull me up. Connect with me and just mention that you saw me here and love to connect with you. And my website is hopkinprofitcreation.com, and you can connect for the old fashioned among us. You can email me at mike@hopkinprofitcreation.com. And again, just mention the podcast and let's connect. I'd love to.
Absolutely. Please connect just as a bonus, $1 million of, no, I'm just kidding. I'm trying to make it attractive so people call you Mike, but no, look, show some love to Mike, contact him, just have the conversation, kind of go through these thought processes. And especially with somebody that has solved millions of dollars of complexity into organizations. Mike, we really appreciate you coming and telling us a little bit about you and your process and methodology. If you are, let's say, you've been already a C-level executive and everything, but you want to impact the next generation, you need to be able to provide this through either integration to your businesses, through coaching, through development, because we need to coach the new generation now from Gen Z and millennials and everything to come in because they're going to be the future as well. I believe in that. This is why we're trying to impact.
100%. I'm so glad you brought that up, Andres. That is so important to give back to that younger generation. Let's get them going. There's so many smart kids coming up, and they're growing up in this world that we kind of came into very slowly. It's just it's all they know now. And so let's help them make it productive.
Thank you, Mike. If you're listening to us, of course, like, subscribe, follow us. If you want to get in contact with us, if you need capital for your business, by the way, this is what we do. All right. So, and we, of course, help expansion, through franchising. If you want your business to grow, franchising is a great way to expand. It's one of the options to be able to expand your business. We believe in that. We travel all over the country, and, we talk about this, with people that want to grow their businesses, but they cannot anymore because their cash flow is asphyxiated. Give this business model to somebody else, so they can actually bring the torch. You eat every day, probably at a franchise business that somebody designed and worked hard. Shout out to Colonel Sanders and everything, there's
That's cool.
so many people. But trust me, that's how business works. And of course, we'd love to see you in the next podcast.